Would you pray with me? O God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. This week, our journey through the story, an abridged version of the Bible, brings us to the book of Judges. In the words of the New Interpreter's Bible Commentary, the book of Judges is one of the most exciting, colorful, and disturbing books of the Bible. It combines stories of political intrigue and assassination, lies and deception, rape and murder, courage and fear, great faith and idolatry, power and greed, sex and suicide, love and death, military victories, and civil war. Sounds like it should be a new series on Netflix, doesn't it? Judges is part of a larger literary collection known as the Deuteronomistic History, which also includes Deuteronomy, Joshua, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings. Scholars believe that editors compiled these texts during the time of the Babylonian exile, centuries after the events they describe, in an attempt to explain why, when God had promised to be with them, it appeared that God had forsaken Israel. The book of Judges recounts the stories of 12 warrior shofetim, or rulers. Judges, we translate it in English, but not in the way we tend to think of judges. These were leaders appointed by God to deliver the Israelites from oppression under their more powerful neighbors, a cycle that repeats itself throughout the book of Judges. And part of what makes Judges so exciting and colorful is that the judges themselves aren't always the most likely candidates for leaders. Take, for example, Gideon. His is a fascinating story, one that the book of Judges fleshes out a bit more than some of the other judges. You can read all of chapters 6 through 8 for his full story, but we gave you an excerpt in today's Worship from Home resources. A UCC pastor in Illinois, Reverend Bob Koch, imagined the story as told by Gideon himself. And I thought it might be fun for us to hear the story in that way, especially since that's how scholars believe these stories might have been passed down as legends told about ancient heroes. So with Reverend Koch's permission, here's a portion of the monologue he entitled Fleeced. My name is Gideon, son of Joash of Ophrah, the town, not the talk show host. Let me start by admitting that I wasn't the brightest flame in the campfire of life. Back in the village, the other boys called me Gideon the Idiot. How I hated that nickname. Still, the sad truth is, sometimes I earned it. I grew up in a troubled time for Israel. The great judges of the past had driven the Canaanites out of the land, but my people, as they always did, fell back into idolatry and sin. God unleashed the Midianites and the Amalekites upon us, desert nomads from the east. Their raiding parties waited until it was harvest time, then swarmed over the land like a plague of locusts, stealing our crops and our livestock. My family and I were wheat farmers. Usually at threshing time, we'd carry the freshly cut wheat to the top of a hill, and once there, we'd throw it up in the air where the wind blew away the chaff. We may as well have put up a billboard that read, "Rob me now," for those desert raiders. But I outsmarted them. I took our wheat and threshed it in a wine press, a stone-lined pit. No Midianites or Amalekites could see me there. Of course, the wind didn't reach the bottom of the pit, so most of the chaff fell right back down on me. I just about decided this wasn't one of my best ideas when a messenger from God joined me and said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Mighty warrior? Me? God didn't know everything after all, I guess. But as long as someone from the head office was there, I decided to get some answers. If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? I asked. Where are all God's wonderful deeds? The Lord tossed us aside and has given us to Midian. The angel said, "Go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. I hereby commission you." In other words, you are the answer to your own prayer. The Spirit of the Lord fell upon me, people said. Well, if it did, it didn't leave much of a dent. I wasn't so sure about this plan of God's, so I asked for not one, but 2 signs. First, I laid a piece of fleece on the threshing room floor, and I asked God to leave the fleece wet, but the floor dry. It happened just as I'd asked. But then it dawned on me that since the stone floor soaked up all the heat of the sun all day, whatever dew fell on it wouldn't linger very long. The fleece, on the other hand, would soak up and hold all the dew it could. So that wasn't much of a test, especially for God. So I tried again. This time I asked that the stone floor stay wet while the fleece remained dry. And again, it was just as I had asked. Now I had no choice. Gideon the idiot prepared to lead his people into battle. So the story of Gideon continues after that, and so did Reverend Koch's monologue. And it continues to be a fascinating story. If you haven't already, be sure to watch Julie Lynn's Children's Moment this week, and you'll hear about how Gideon defeated the Midianites with only 300 soldiers. But for today, I want to pause here and invite us to see what connections we might find between Gideon's story and our own. For starters, I think most of us can relate to wanting a sign from God. I've often joked, with a degree of seriousness, that I wish God worked like a magic 8-ball. Remember those? Ask a question and get a clear answer. My sources say no. It is decidedly so. Often, when we're faced with a difficult decision, when we find ourselves unsure of which direction to go or facing an uncertain future, we might find ourselves wishing we had Gideon's fleece. We might want God to do something concrete, tangible, something we can see or hear or touch that directs our path and tells us clearly what to do. Sometimes, in ways that we might even be reluctant to tell people about, we do get them, those moments when we sense God leading in ways we cannot explain, but we cannot deny. At other times, though, we struggle. We question. We listen for God's voice, but hear only our inner turmoil. When we look a little closer at Gideon's story, though, we're reminded that Gideon wasn't asking God what he should do. God had already told Gideon that. During a time of great hardship for the Israelite people, God's messenger came to Gideon, the youngest member of the weakest tribe, and said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." As Anthony Robinson once wrote in the UCC Daily Devotional, it's as if God went to the wrong address. Instead of mighty warrior, God knocked on the door of Joe Schmo. Interestingly, Gideon's initial response isn't to question his own fitness for the job. His first question is a much deeper one, a question many of us have asked in the midst of challenging times. With all due respect, Gideon says, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? It's the question that scholars believe Israelites were trying to answer when they wrote down this Deuteronomistic history in exile. And it's a question that people of faith have asked across the ages, both individually and corporately. Where is God in the midst of difficult times? It's a question to which there are no easy or satisfying answers. And sometimes all we can do is join our voice with that of the psalmist who asked, How long will you forget us, O God? But here, as Gideon looked on a nation in shambles and asked whether God was with them, the answer he received was this statement: You have strength, so go and rescue Israel from the power of Midian. Am I not personally sending you? Or, as Reverend Koch put it in his monologue, you are the answer to your own prayer. Gideon wanted a sign, but in a way, God said to Gideon, you are the sign. Yes, you, the one who feels weak and scared and unsure. Your willingness to step out in faith is the sign that I am here with my people still. Like many before and after him, Gideon felt inadequate to do the task God had given him. But God has, as Anthony Robinson puts it, a preferential option for the unlikely. And that includes us. So as we look at the world around us, all the sickness and pain and anger and division and brokenness that we see, we might find ourselves wondering why all this is happening. We might be tempted to despair. We might ask God, as Gideon asked, with all due respect, where are you? Like Gideon, we might want a sign that God is with us, that healing is possible, that peace and love will triumph. As Christians, we have received that sign. Luke's gospel reminds us, and this shall be a sign unto you. You shall find a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths, lying in a manger. Jesus is our sign, our promise of Emmanuel, God with us. In these challenging times, we hear Jesus' voice reminding us that the greatest commandment of all is to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. As we seek to follow Jesus, as we strive to love God and to love one another in tangible, concrete ways, perhaps we become the very signs that we are waiting for. Visible signs of God's presence in our world. May it be so. Amen.